Hello students, welcome to week 5 for COM 308. This week we're looking at emotions and trust and deceptions within interpersonal communication. We're considering a number of things as we read chapter 8 and 9 within the course text. We're also watching 4 videos related to emotional intelligences and leadership and trust and things of that nature. We're completing ICA number 3 as well as completing discussion board number 5 with our reply posts, with our formal post due on Friday and our reply post due on Sunday. And we are also selecting our critical assignment topic this week. So we have a lot of different things going on, a lot of important things to keep in mind as we move through the course content. As you look at the critical assignment, I'm going to switch slides and show you what the critical assignment is and then move back to the actual assignment for this week. You are writing a paper on a movie where you are analyzing interpersonal relationships. The movie must be chosen from the list provided in the PDF in Blackboard, and you will take part in writing a 4 to 5 page analysis of the film and presenting the findings to the class, not through a web video presentation, just in a writing, where you're analyzing the film using one of 2 prompts provided in the PDF. So in Blackboard, there's a PDF. It has a list of movies and the interpersonal relationship those movies have. And then like When Harry Met Sally is a great one to looking at interpersonal relationships and things of that nature, and a number of different things that are communicatively influenced by that. And there are other films on there. So you're going to pick a film from that list and then analyze the movie utilizing one of 2 prompts provided on that PDF. The paper itself will be 4 to 5 pages in length. This week, you are reading and looking at that PDF and determining the film you want to use for your critical assignment. You're going to also provide me with a brief rationale, maybe about 100 words or so, explaining why. So you need to clearly state which film you select and why, and then 2, explain what aspects of interpersonal communication you plan to evaluate when watching the film. You can obviously change that as the paper evolves. This is really primarily serving as a brainstorming function at this point, and so I can take a look at it and see that you are on the right path. When you look at the paper, you'll see there are 2 prompts provided for you to utilize. One is for you to look at the interpersonal communication concepts you've chosen and look and determine how the plot and development of the characters utilize those and provide some theoretical explanations to that. The next one is for you, for each intercommunicational skill you've looked at, you believe the character should develop based off of what you've watched in the film. So there's 2 different angles you can apply to that. There are numerous films on that list with some interpersonal concepts that are directly related to the film listed by each film and the way they're categorized. If you want to choose a film not off that list, that's fine. You need to get that approved from me prior to submitting your assignment this week, but there are so many on there, I don't think that will be something that happens. But do keep that in mind. We're going to start working on that now. This is something you need to start working on early. It's due in week 8, yes, but it's week 5, so you may need to secure the film in some way if you can't find it on Amazon or Netflix or something like that and physically get it in your hands to watch it. The next thing you'll be working on is discussion board number 5. Sometimes students get confused on this assignment, so particularly pay close attention to how I'm going to explain this. What you're going to do is you're going to pick a sitcom to watch from one particular decade and watch at least 2 episodes from that sitcom. So you're going to say you want to explore what sitcoms were like in the 1960s. You're going to pick and select one sitcom that was developed and aired in the 60s and watch 2 episodes of that, either on YouTube, Hulu, Netflix, Amazon, wherever you can find it. Once you've done that, you're going to summarize the types of interpersonal relationships presented and how the emotions were presented in each episode, and consider how emotional the characters become and how open they are about their feelings based off of the decade in which the show aired. After that, you're going to answer the 4 questions presented here in the discussion board prompt. You're going to write at least 300 words total by answering those 4 questions and write 2 replies to at least 2 students. So you can pick any sitcoms, like if you choose the 90s and you want to look at Beverly Hills 90210, or you pick the 80s and you want to do this, or you want to watch The Wonder Years and that aired in the 90s but was about the 50s and 60s and 70s. So you can choose what you want, but you have to clearly choose the decade and pick a show that aired in that decade, because we're looking at how media shares interpersonal relationships through some mediated content like a sitcom, and how that may have changed over time or what we know today to be, and looking particularly at the expression of emotional intelligences. After that, we have ICA number 3 due. So this is the same idea as ICA number 1 and 2, where you're going to select and determine and find a communicative event that you're going to observe and provide some analysis to. I'm not going to give a lot of feedback on this because this is presented and written in the same manner as you have done the other two. Now we're just on the third one, where you're going to spend some time looking at that from that perspective. This week, we're going to go over two theories in particular that may be of use to you in doing these analyses. Something different than you've been doing before and may be helpful. The first theory we're going to look at is attribution theory. Attribution theory helps us understand why we respond as we do to persons and events. It also speaks to the fact that we like to be able to explain why others behave they do. Particularly, the theory posits that we assign meaning to behaviors by ascribing motives and causes for those said behaviors. In other words, whether we believe a specific behavior is due to a personality or a situation the person finds himself in affects our evaluation of that person. Particularly as we assign meaning meaning to behavior of others, we also ascribe motives and causes for their actions. So for instance, suppose a couple seated near you at the restaurants gets up in the middle of their meals and leave. We will naturally, as humans, think, why did they leave? Did they have an argument? Did they feel ill? Was the food bad? Did they overhear us saying something? Was the room too warm? We attribute behaviors to actions and something in the disposition of people involved. We assume it has an internal cause. That is, we believe it is caused by their characteristics. When we attribute it to something about the situation or environment, we identify external causes. That is, we believe behavior is caused by something outside of them. In a nutshell, we begin to assign meaning to social behaviors based off of what we observe very naturally. So we provide attributions to social behaviors in public settings. What we determine to be reasons for one's behaviors or influences tends to deal with our perceptions of feelings towards that person. So if we see someone reacting in an off way in a social setting, we typically assign feelings and perceptions towards that person based off of the feelings we attribute towards them based off of their social behaviors. So it's a bit complicated to extend, but it essentially is what we use. What the theory tells us is that we naturally assign meaning to behaviors based off of ascribing motives and causes to those behaviors that happen in social settings. We really infer and explain the causes of social behaviors, and we try to determine what those are in order of assigning interpersonal characteristics to that person. The next theory we look at is social exchange theory, or it's also in the book, it's listed as cost-benefit theory. It's also noted as the price we are willing to pay for a relationship, and it equates determining what we weigh as pros and cons of relationships as a simple math problem. So we look at our perceived relationship rewards, and what we subtract are the perceived relationship costs, and does that equal to relationship benefits we're looking to perceive or gain from that particular relationship. Particularly, we work to sustain relationships that give us the greatest total of benefit versus cost, and that relationship will only be sustained as long as our perceived benefits of the relationship outweigh the emotional expenditures. So we're only going to spend as much time with somebody that we feel that we are getting something positive or something that we view as positive out of the relationship. Particularly, social exchange theory tells us that we work to sustain relationships that give us the greatest total benefit that we can, and we represent this concept by constructing a relational balance sheet in which we keep tracks of rewards and expenditures. How much am I putting in based off of how much rewards I'm getting from the relationship? Relationships rewards are the positive outcomes we hope to acquire from relationships with people, such as increased self-esteem and enhanced self-security, better coping mechanisms, friendship, whatever it is we view as loyalty, things of that nature. So perceived relationship costs are the price we pay, or the personal energy that we put into a relationship to hope to reap some type of positive reward. The typical cost included is what we invest in the relationship, and is known as relationship work, psychological and physical stress, to help us with our self-image and whatever that may be. As we move through relationships and they get more intrinsic and more deeply involved, we compare and contrast the profits and costs of one relationship. We also establish a comparison for alternatives theory. This is where we make a comparison of profits and costs derived from one relationship compared to those that might be derived from another relationship. Particularly, we weigh the profits and costs of said relationships against each other to determine if we can if we believe we can easily find another person to satisfy whatever those current needs are that the current partner is not providing. And we're actually very likely to extricate ourselves from unsatisfactory relationships and enter a new, potentially more rewarding one based off of the cost benefit of the relationship. So not that this is to say that this is great or ethical, but what we're saying is in any situation, you can apply it to coworkers, to best friends, to spouses, to boyfriends and girlfriends, to whatever it may be. We only extend the relationship to be as the length that it is based off of the perceived benefits we're getting from the relationship. If the cost becomes too high compared to the reward, then we're naturally going to diffuse the relationship or end the relationship with one another. So it's very interesting to keep in mind as we look at some of these things when it comes to power and influence and trust and deception and things of that nature. As we look at the course content, there are 5 types of power that Gamble and Gamble describe within chapter 10. So the first one is reward power. This is power that's based in the fact that one party in the relationship controls something valued by the other party, and that the person with reward power knows what the other person wants and is able to retain and provide it, unless the other, as long as they are receiving rewards as well. So rewards can be tangible, like jobs, money, perks, or intangible, like friendship, security, and emotional needs. So the extent to which one person values the reward determines the amount of the power the other is able to exercise. The next type of power is also found in a relationship is coercive power. Coercive power is the ability to deliver negative consequences in response to the actions of another. Power derived from force or threat. It's when you use coercion to exert power and to get responses based off of the fact that somebody feels threatened by this exercising of some type of psychological coercive power. It can compel us to maintain a relationship we might not feel that we're good in. May do something that is unethical. We may do something that's unethical based on how highly we have been coerced to do it. And then the next one is expert power. This is where power is derived from having special knowledge or skills that another thinks he or she needs. This expert power is presumed to possess a special knowledge or skill others believe they need, and expert power holds the ability to influence others because of their training, background, and such. So such power is further enhanced when we believe that expert source to be unbiased with nothing to gain personally from influencing us. And so then after that, we move into legitimate power. Legitimate power is the type of power in which one party in a relationship controls the other. Most of us believe that somebody has the right to exert power over us merely because of roles they perform, who they are, the positions they hold. So, for example, students perceive their teacher to have some type of legitimate power. Law-abiding citizens assume police officers have some type of legitimate power. Employees perceive their employers to have legitimate power over them as well. This is often used to reduce conflict, and legitimate power convinces those with less power to adhere to their requests in an easier way. The next one is referent power. This is when power is based in the idea that the other person's respect for identification of the power holder. So she requests because she identifies with respect. The relationship is a simple one. Our desire to be like someone increases, so referent power is ensued by somebody in that sense. So the more attractive we find someone, the more we respect him or her, the greater admiration we have for that person. We tend to mirror their behaviors and respect them and let them have more of a powerful relationship in our life. The last type of power is persuasive power, and this is the ability of one party in a relationship to persuade the other party to act in a desired way. Sometimes a person has a power just because of their power to persuade and convey information in a well thought out argument. The individual's power is based on logic and reasonableness of his or her arguments, or the demonstrated superiority of his or her knowledge. Persuasive power really enables one to persuade another through the presentation of well-reasoned arguments. Lastly, it's important to look at the role of attitude. So an attitude is a mental state of our readiness to respond to that which causes us to react in particular ways to given stimulus. And so with that, each of our attitudes represents a predisposition to react positively or negatively towards certain people, ideas, things, or situations. Attitudes come from family, religion, education, ideological perspectives, and things of that nature. So as you look at power and how people exert power, it's important to know that we act accordingly to situations we carry around and pictures in our head and do not necessarily correspond with reality, but we assign meaning to them based off of attitudes we have towards certain ideas and things. This applies to power and persuasion. So it's important to keep in mind the role attitudes have within that. As you move through the course content this week, please remember what's expected of us in weeks in chapter 8 and 9. I highlighted some things about power because it's really important to understand that at this point in the chapter. We're also watching some videos on emotional intelligences and things like that. We're completing ICA number 3 as well as discussion board number 5 and picking our critical assignment topic. So if you have any questions, let me know. I look forward to reaching out to you.